What if the most damning piece of evidence in a murder trial wasn't a bloody knife or a smoking gun? What if it was something far more insidious? A single word. This was the lie.
The legal team representing the Chamberlain family say lives could have been saved if the original ruling that Azaria Chamberlain was taken by a dingo was upheld.
A single, toxic piece of disinformation perfectly engineered to convince a nation of a mother's guilt. The rumor, which was utterly false, was that the name Azaria meant sacrifice in the wilderness, and in the frantic, desperate search for a villain, this lie provided the perfect, horrifying hook. But it wasn't the lie that sealed her fate in court. The prosecution claimed to have something far more powerful, irrefutable, scientific proof. Their key piece of evidence, presented as a scientific masterstroke, was a substance found under the dashboard, which forensic experts confidently, authoritatively identified as fetal blood. It was the absolute cornerstone of the state's entire case. In truth, it was an industry-sound deadening compound, a simple anti-noise emulsion sprayed on during the car's manufacture at the Holden factory. A mother was sentenced to life in prison based on a scientific claim that was so fundamentally and grotesquely wrong, it defies belief. If this case has taught us anything, it's the critical importance of questioning every single claim, no matter how authoritative it seems. And if you believe in that mission, take a second to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next investigation.
An automotive spray? Well, thank God they didn't find a leaking oil filter. They might have charged her with running a criminal syndicate.
Precisely. And this catastrophic error wasn't an isolated mistake. It was the endpoint of a nationwide hysteria. To understand how science itself could be so corrupted, we have to go back to the beginning.
The dingo's got my baby!
The entire forensic investigation was contaminated from the start by a powerful cognitive bias, confirmation bias. The police and prosecution already had their theory that Lindy was guilty. The forensics then became a theater to prove that theory, not to find the truth. Take, for example, tiny specks found on a pair of scissors in the family's car. They were presented to the court with great authority as proof that Lindy had cut Azaria's blood-soaked clothing. The reality, years later, advanced testing revealed the specks were a combination of copper, lead, and tin, consistent with cutting copper wire, not fabric or blood. Even the so-called arterial blood spray pattern found under the car's dashboard, presented with dramatic graphics in court, was later comprehensively debunked. It was a combination of spilled drinks, dust, and harmless chemical residue. Time and time again, science wasn't being used to uncover the truth. It was being twisted to manufacture it. And to understand the ferocity of that firestorm, we have to remember that Australia's media ecosystem in 1980 was almost monolithic. There was no internet, no cable, no 500 channels. The entire nation got its reality from a handful of newspapers and 3 television networks. These outlets were in a brutal, cutthroat war for ratings and readership. They had learned that drama and outrage were far more sellable products than nuanced truth. When this quiet family from the outback stumbled into the national spotlight, the media machine didn't see a tragedy. It saw a product.
It's a wild thought now, isn't it? A whole country sharing the exact same story from the same source on the same night. A single narrative could completely dominate the national consciousness. There was nowhere to hide from it.
And in the Chamberlain case, the media found the perfect fuel for their fire: their faith. The Chamberlains were Seventh-day Adventists. To the predominantly Anglo-Celtic Australia of the time, it was a faith seen as peculiar, secretive. The media knew that fear of the unknown was a powerful tool, and they used it with surgical precision.
Seventh-day Adventists. Right, to be honest, that's a new one on me. I've got to turn this over to the legends. For anyone in the comments who knows more about this, what was it about their faith that was so misunderstood back then? We're genuinely keen to get the real story from those who know.
It was precisely that, the fear of the unknown. For the predominantly Anglican and Catholic Australia of the time, Adventists were seen as an outside group. They observed a Saturday Sabbath, had dietary restrictions like avoiding pork, and often didn't drink alcohol. In the eyes of many, this made them different, secretive. And the media exploited this mercilessly. Absurd rumors began to circulate, whispered in pubs and then printed as fact. Stories about bizarre sacrificial rituals, about Lindy dressing Azaria in black clothes, all of it completely false. But in an atmosphere of fear, the truth becomes irrelevant. They weren't being judged on who they were, but on what people imagined them to be. In the court of public opinion, Lindy Chamberlain's gravest transgression wasn't an act she committed, but a performance she failed to deliver. Society demanded a theatrical, public despair. What they received, informed by her faith, was quiet strength. Tragically, because she refused to collapse for the cameras, she was almost instantly branded as cold, calculating, and therefore profoundly suspect.
That's the part that's just rotten to the core. How on earth does the way a person chooses to express their private pain become relevant to the actual facts? It's like the entire country demanded a show, and when she wouldn't play the part, they declared her guilty. So I have to ask the legends watching this, do you think we still do this today? Do we still judge people, especially women, for not grieving in the way we expect them to? Let us know your thoughts below.
But the cruelest irony of this entire saga is that the truth was never a mystery. It was there from the very first day, written in the red desert sand for anyone who knew how to read the language of the land. And there were men there who were fluent. Local Anangu trackers, men like Nipperwin Marty, were brought to the campsite. For them, the scene wasn't a confusing mess. It was a clear, sequential story. Their testimony at the first inquest was not folklore, it was expert forensic observation. They identified the tracks of a dingo approaching and entering the tent. Crucially, they testified that the tracks leading away from the tent were deeper and heavier, with clear drag marks alongside them, indicating the animal was carrying a significant burden. They even found the spot where the dingo had laid the bundle down and shaken it.
So let me get this straight. You have the world's foremost experts on that specific piece of land, reading direct physical evidence from the scene, and their testimony was just, what, dismissed?
Worse, it was devalued. Trackers like Nipperwin Marty gave clear, unambiguous testimony at the first inquest. They described dingo tracks leading into the Chamberlain's tent and another set of heavier tracks leading out, with drag marks in the sand indicating the animal was carrying a burden. This was direct, physical evidence read by the most qualified experts possible.
So let me get this straight. The people who actually knew the land, knew the animals, and could read the evidence written in the dirt were basically ignored, all in favor of a story built on rumor and later on dodgy science from a lab hundreds of miles away. It just makes your blood boil.
Precisely. In a courtroom dominated by white, urban lawyers and scientists, their ancient, experience-based knowledge was treated as quaint and unreliable. A truth that was written in the earth was ignored in favor of a lie being constructed in a laboratory. But the true turning point wouldn't arrive for years. In 1986, a British tourist stumbling through the scrub found it. Half buried in the iconic red dirt right near a known dingo lair was Azaria's matinee jacket, the one piece of physical evidence the prosecution had insisted didn't exist. And this changed everything. The discovery of the jacket wasn't just a new clue, it was the irrefutable proof that the core narrative of the prosecution, that Lindy had disposed of the body and the clothes, was a complete fabrication.
My God, there it is. It's like the very land itself coughed up the truth just to prove the entire official story was a complete and utter farce. After all the experts, all the courtrooms, all the headlines, the truth was just waiting in the dirt the whole time.
This discovery forced the system's hand. Lindy Chamberlain, who by this point had endured 3 brutal years of a life sentence for a crime she did not commit, was immediately released from prison. A royal commission was called, which ultimately quashed all convictions against both Lindy and Michael. They were officially, unequivocally, and publicly declared innocent. The government later awarded them $1.3 million in compensation for wrongful imprisonment, a figure that was less a victory and more a formal financial admission of a catastrophic failure of the state, a price tag on a ruined life.
Ah, the classic "sorry we ruined your life" loyalty bonus. 1.3 million. I'm sure that makes up for everything. They probably sent it over with a gift basket.
Indeed. Her strength was, in many ways, the final piece of evidence of her innocence. In the end, perhaps the most powerful final word comes from Lindy herself. She was asked how she endured the hatred, the prison sentence, the destruction of her family, and her reputation. Her answer is a lesson in conviction. She said, "When you know you are in the right, you have a strength that comes from within."
And that's the truth that outlasted all the lies, the junk science, and the headlines. It's a heavy one in this case, and it just shows how important it is to keep digging. If you believe in bringing these stories to light, then this is your invitation to join the legends. We've got more truths to uncover.
The Royal Commission delivered its verdict, and Lindy Chamberlain was finally exonerated. The official case file is closed, but one piece of physical evidence continues to fuel debate among investigators to this day: the matinee jacket. It was the piece of evidence that proved her innocence, found years later near a dingo lair, but the way it was found remains a profound mystery. Forensic reports noted it was neatly laid out, not torn or buried, and some of the press studs were still done up. How could the jacket be there, yet show so little evidence of the violent event that must have occurred? It's the final, haunting anomaly in a case full of them. We don't have a definitive answer, so we're putting this final puzzle piece on the board for the legends. What's your theory on the jacket? The debate continues in the comments below.
The dingoes got my baby!
The Chamberlain case is a chilling reminder of how easily justice can be derailed by hysteria. But it's not the only time a national institution has been utterly humiliated by a flawed plan. What happens when the target isn't a grieving family, but 20,000 birds? Join us as we investigate one of the most bizarre conflicts in history. Click on the video on your screen now.